For 2 years, it seemed like American artificial intelligence was unstoppable.
Microsoft announced this week that artificial intelligence will soon allow conversations with its software and search engine Bing. Google raced to announce similar plans.
The tech giant is to boost its Siri voice assistant and operating systems with OpenAI's ChatGPT as it seeks to catch up in the AI race.
Leading developers like OpenAI attracted billions of dollars in investment by arguing that this technology was the future, and they needed a lot of money to develop it. Then, just over a week ago, a new app arrived on the scene, DeepSeek.
So this app called DeepSeek, it's an AI chatbot, quite similar to ChatGPT.
Eva Doe covers tech policy for The Post. She says DeepSeek claimed that it spent less than $6 million developing an early version of the app.
Which is really a minuscule amount compared to some of these U.S. tech giants who have been fundraising for billions and tens of billions and even hundreds of billions of dollars to create cutting-edge models.
The Chinese startup's AI assistant catapulted to the top of app stores last weekend. And this has all spooked Washington, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street. Tech stocks dropped Monday, and U.S. officials, engineers, and investors have become even more alarmed by the competitive threat posed by China.
The AI race has been something that both U.S. officials and Chinese officials have been laser focused on. And the common wisdom had been that China is quite a bit behind, maybe a year behind, maybe more. And this new AI model shows they've really closed the gap. They're much closer as a rival than people had realized.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Elahe Izadi. It's Wednesday, January 29th. Today, the AI arms race and whether China just pulled ahead, and what the U.S. can do about it. My colleague Martine Powers spoke with Eva, and I'll let her take it from here.
Okay, so let's talk first a little bit more about this app. And how does it work? I mean, is it just kind of the same thing as ChatGPT where you just like put in a question or say like, write a script for this thing and then it just spits out something back at you?
Yeah, it's similar and it has that chat interface. I think what has really drawn a lot of people is it shows sort of the quote-unquote thinking process of the algorithm. So
what do you mean by that, the thinking process?
Yeah, so you'll ask a question and then it'll start talking to itself and you'll see it talking to itself. It'll say, this is the question, these are the things that I need to think about, and that sort of mimicry of the human thinking process is something that is just very engaging to the average person.
So if this is an app that's similar to other apps that have been out on the market that people have used, why is everyone freaking out about it?
Well, I think the main thing is just how cheaply this company is saying it's able to do this. It's saying it only cost less than $6 million for it to train this algorithm.
And for comparison, how much has it cost to train something like ChatGPT?
Well, first of all, the $6 million number is just for the training costs. And of course, to really build any complicated tech product, there's a lot more that goes into it as far as R&D, as far as all the things that get to that point. For companies like OpenAI, they're working definitely in the scale of the billions or tens of billions. OpenAI just announced this $100 billion project that they're working on. So this is much fewer zeros, just to sort of a shocking degree.
Yeah. Wait, so then how were the creators of this app able to achieve that? Like, how were they able to do something that appears to be such advanced AI, but do it for way less money?
Well, part of it is because they've been under these export restrictions from the United States. So they have not been able to purchase as many of these advanced chips as they might have liked. So they're working with...
And these would have been American chips that we send over to China, except we're not sending them over now?
Exactly. So NVIDIA, the U.S. company, is the leader in the world for producing these kind of chips that are the building blocks of these big AI systems. And so they're now restricted from exporting and selling to China.
Wait, why is that? Like, why was NVIDIA blocked from selling chips to China? Who did that?
So the Biden administration has done several rounds of tightening export controls for these kind of chips to China, sort of with the express purpose to stop Chinese companies from building systems like this. So
basically saying, we don't want you to come up with this technology faster than we can come up with it, so we're going to not give you the ingredients you need or that we think you need to make it.
Exactly. And so in the past couple of years, it's become increasingly hard for Chinese companies to be able to purchase these. So there's been, some purchases through the black market that certain Chinese companies have made. They've also been purchasing sort of lower grade chips and just using more of them and piecing them together. I think people are still trying to understand, in DeepSeek's case, exactly what kind of system they were using.
And tell me more about that. Like, what do we know about how DeepSeek's product came to work so effectively despite Biden's intentions with these export controls?
Well, a lot of it is very technical, but they've taken a hard look at, which processes can be done in sort of like a streamlined fashion. And I think part of what the industry was doing this weekend was computer programmers who really understand this stuff, sort of looking through the code and trying to understand exactly how they built a system that is, more streamlined and uses less computing power to still be able to be doing something quite sophisticated.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the question of it being open source. Can you explain that? Why does that matter?
Open source. So there's two sort of schools of thought for developing these AI models. One is sort of closed proprietary systems, and one is open source, more similar to like the Android operating system. And so DeepSeek is open source, which means that anyone can take the model and build stuff on top of it and make something new. And so this has been a model that Chinese startups have been sort of interested in, especially in recent years, as they've come under growing U.S. sanctions. Sort of producing these kind of free products that they share with the world has been a way for them to sort of stay connected.
Yeah. And what exactly do we know about the people who developed DeepSeek?
It's a Chinese startup called DeepSeek, the same name as the app, and it's just a couple years old. They've kind of come out of nowhere in that they weren't super famous before. A lot of their engineers are very young. So it really is one of these scrappy little startups.
And it's a company based in China. Are they funded by the Chinese government? Do they have a connection to the Chinese government?
In China, it's hard for any tech company to really succeed in the long run without government backing, but they're not an SOE, they're not a state-owned enterprise. They are private sector and are a relatively unknown startup, which is part of what took people by surprise because there's a few, Chinese tech giants. There's Tencent, Alibaba, Huawei, and these giant Chinese internet companies were sort of the ones that people expected to be making these AI breakthroughs. So for a relatively unknown startup to sort of emerge has really taken people by surprise.
After the break, Martine and Eva talk about the sell-off of American tech stocks and fears of an AI bubble. We'll be right back.
My name is Michelle Singletary, and I'm the personal finance columnist for The Washington Post. When I was growing up, I was raised by my grandmother, who was such a masterful money manager. And I watched her handle her money and talk to me about it. And I like to think that I'm the reader's big mama. There's so much information about your money out there, a lot of it wrong or inappropriate. But when you pay for a subscription to the Post, you're paying for a skilled journalist who has had years of experience, who I hope that you can trust. Your subscription helps pay for my salary. It helps pay for the illustrators, the copy editors, all the people who are involved in putting together the material that you read that could help inform your life. I'm Michelle Singletary, and I'm one of the people behind the Post.
So I want to come back to this idea of Americans freaking out. And as we mentioned earlier, that freak out also came in the form of a pretty significant drop-off in the stock market as a reflection of the news or people's kind of growing acknowledgement that this app was on the market and that it seemed to work really well. You said that part of what has freaked people out here, to keep using that phrase, is the fact that they were able to do it relatively cheaply, if you take them at their word, and the fact that they were able to create this app without access to these American-made computer chips. But, what does that mean? What does that mean for American AI companies? And why does it matter to them if this other company just happened to do it for cheaper and with some extra logistical hurdles?
Well, it means that the race is very much on. And in a way, it means that all companies, including American ones, will be able to make this kind of technology more cheaply by applying these kind of principles. I think what's quite concerning to the U.S. companies is we've seen this happen in other tech sectors where lower-cost Chinese competitors have come in and they've dominated market share globally quite quickly with lower prices in a way that ultimately drove U.S. companies out of business. They just weren't able to keep operating at a similar cost level.
So is the fear here that these American tech companies like OpenAI that have been pouring all this money into AI technology, that they're not as valuable companies as we think that they are, or that there's at least a possibility that they might lose the market on this pretty soon?
Yeah, certainly. Well, that certainly has been the jitters over the weekend that we saw, which is, a reevaluation in the industry of exactly how valuable these companies are. And we saw on Monday just this huge stock sell-off from investors who just aren't sure.
Wondering if these tech companies are a bubble.
Yeah.
So what has been the response to all this from the Trump administration?
Well, President Trump himself, he's called this a wake-up call for U.S. tech companies.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win because we have the greatest scientists in the world.
And he sort of put a positive spin on it. He said it could be a good thing where U.S. companies are able to spend less money to produce AI products.
I would say that's a positive. That could be very much a positive development. So instead of spending billions and billions, you'll spend less and you'll come up with, hopefully, the same solution.
But he very much said, this is a wake-up call. We're going to have to be laser-focused on being competitive.
And what does that mean going forward? What does he want either these tech companies or the government to do to keep pushing the U.S. ahead so they don't lose to China in this AI war?
Well, we've already seen just in the first few days of Trump's second term that AI is a focus. So one of the first things he did was he repealed the Biden administration's executive order on AI, which essentially his argument is this gives a green light for this industry to run with fewer regulatory hurdles.
Can you explain a little bit more of that? What was Biden trying to do and what is Trump trying to do differently?
So the Biden administration executive order was also an effort to fast track the U.S. AI industry. And so part and parcel of that was coming up with the regulatory framework for it, how to make these technologies in a way that's safe and legal. The Trump administration will have to tackle some of those same problems and same issues, which they sort of want to start from scratch. They've just sort of wiped out the Biden administration's rules. But that doesn't mean they won't come up against similar questions.
I want to ask a couple more things about this app itself, because a lot of how people are talking about this reminds me of the discussion around TikTok. That there's this Chinese app that, has different algorithms and is able to do things way more effectively than American apps that are sort of similar, and fears around national security concerns or, what this app might be capable of. To what extent do you see those questions as relevant here? Like, are there national security concerns about people here in the U.S. using DeepSeek, or are there questions about how this app works or whether they could be harmful here?
Yeah, certainly. And what's kind of ironic is that, for TikTok, there was so much debate about, the user data and potential security issues. And that was for an app where they very much had firewalled U.S. user data in the United States. And so DeepSeek, when you're signing up, it tells you the data is stored in China, on servers in China. And from that,
we're not keeping this a secret. Like, it's all going to China.
Yeah. So in that sense, for anyone who is sort of like security concerned about where data is being stored, it would be a bigger issue than TikTok.
And then there's also the censorship question, right? I haven't had the chance yet to use this app, in part because it is now so sought after right now. It's like hard to actually get new registration to get it on your phone. But my understanding is that there are some topics that the AI doesn't engage with or isn't giving accurate answers to, particularly when it comes to sensitive parts of Chinese history. I think the example that's been cited a lot is like if you ask it about Tiananmen Square, it's not going to play ball.
Yeah, certainly. So again, it's a bit ironic because this was sort of the theoretical fear with TikTok that the Chinese government could censor it in these ways if it wanted to. And so DeepSeek very much, this is the way it works. It operates under the Chinese censorship rules. So politically sensitive topics in China, you're not going to be able to get an answer out of it.
And so is there any talk of trying to ban it here in the U.S.? I mean, considering how much we've talked about potential ban to TikTok, and I know now President Trump is trying to roll that back or protect TikTok here, but considering the fact that this app is saying we store the data of American users in China, that it's clear that it is not engaging in topics that are sensitive for the Chinese government. Like, is there any talk of the U.S. government saying this is exactly the kind of app that we're worried about and we're not going to let people use it here?
Yeah, so this is all so new. It reaching the top of the charts in U.S. downloads is a very new thing. So I think lawmakers in the U.S. are very much still getting their heads around this new phenomenon. So I think it depends probably if it's sort of just a flash in the pan or if it has a lasting large usership in the United States. Like with TikTok, a lot of the concern is just the number of people who are using it on a daily basis for hours at a time each day. So I think it remains to be seen. Are people just downloading DeepSeek just out of curiosity these few days, or
are people going to really come to rely on it in a bigger way?
Exactly. But for any of these apps, for an AI chatbot, there's similar privacy and data concerns with TikTok in that the more you use it, the more you interact with it, the more data it has about you. And for these kind of AI chatbots, they're more useful the more data you upload into it. So yeah, if it really becomes a phenomenon, there are going to be those kind of privacy issues.
And then what does this mean for the tech world? Like if Monday's stock market temporary panic suggested that there is a growing sense of maybe skepticism about these companies and the money that they're pouring into AI. But then at the same time, they have Trump saying, we got to win this race. Like, this is a moment to push forward faster. What will change now because of this news around this Chinese app?
Well, I think it certainly pushes all these U.S. companies to work harder on their own models and to take a hard look at their costs, which I think before it was maybe there was a little bit of complacency in that they felt these Chinese companies were maybe too far behind to be serious rivals, and maybe an assumption that just with the best chips and the most chips, U.S. companies would be able to build the most advanced models, and that was sort of it. And this very much throws some of those assumptions out the window and makes it very much a tight race.
But does that mean that you're going to have American companies who are like, well, we actually need to figure out how to do this cheaper? Or is this a moment where it's like, let's just throw even more billions of dollars at this challenge of developing the best AI in the fastest way possible, and that we're going to see even more enormous investment?
I think both, in that so this very much is a proof of concept that you can build some of these models much cheaper. And so I think there's going to be pressure on U.S. companies to deliver similar things. At the same time, there is enormous interest in funding these projects, both in the private sector and both from the government in the United States, and sort of a bipartisan consensus that AI is such an important technology. It's important on a national level that the United States stays ahead in this area.
In all of the conversation around this, there seems to be this assumption, like, of course it's good for American companies to win the AI race, and it's bad for Chinese companies to be winning this race. But, I mean, there are a lot of ways in which, American consumers benefit from having access to cheaper Chinese products that are more plentiful and, help us do business. And, what's bad about a Chinese company, winning the AI race? And could that be good for American consumers?
Yeah, I think part of sort of this stock crash that we saw is just sort of generalized anxieties about, is this AI stuff too good to be true? And to what extent? Is it a bubble? Yes. So in a sense, if one company in the world has found a way to do this kind of thing in a more efficient, cheaper way, that's better for all companies in the long run. But I think part of these jitters is just these technologies are so technical, few people really understand how they work, and yet there's so much money and governmental power sort of tied up in it, and people are just suddenly not quite sure, is this the right path? Is this the only path? Are these companies using these billions of dollars wisely or not?
Eva, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Eva Doe covers tech policy for The Post. She spoke to my co-host, Martine Powers. Eva has a book out now about how one of the world's most controversial tech companies was built, set against the backdrop of the political, social, and economic transformation of China. It's called House of Huawei, the secret of China's most powerful company. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. If you're looking for the latest updates on the big news of the day, check out our morning news briefing, The 7. We bring you the 7 stories you need to know about every weekday morning by 7 a.m. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's show was produced by Rennie Svirnovsky. It was mixed by Sam Baer and edited by Maggie Penman. Thanks also to James Graff. I'm Elahe Izadi. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.